Most fuses used on bombs are either time or contact fuses. Time fuses produce either an air burst or a burst at a set time after release. Some contact fuses are designed to burst instantaneously on impact. Others burst at a short interval after striking. Now, a new class of fuse has been developed, the VT fuse, which functions on approach to the target. It functions automatically when it comes under the influence of the target, which may be water, land, or any target on or above them. A bomb with a fuse which functions on impact is very damaging against an unshielded target above the ground. But it will seldom injure targets dug into the ground, such as men in foxholes, or targets protected by banks or revetments. To damage such targets, it must score a direct hit. And a bomb with a fuse set at delay, of course, is even less effective against such targets. Most of the force of its burst is upward and out. The ideal burst against shielded targets is an air burst. The difficulty of securing effective air bursts with time fuses prompted the development of the VT fuse. This fuse, which functions on approach to the target, will cause a burst high enough off the ground, usually 20 to 60 feet, so that the bomb fragments will reach down into a foxhole or behind the strongest revetment. Other VT fuses have been designed for use on rockets fired from planes. Like the bomb, this rocket bursts not on the target, but in the vicinity of the target. This is what happens. Once fired, the fuse has a timing device, which will cause it to arm in not less than 7/10 of a second, and not more than 1 full second. For a plane traveling 300 miles per hour, that means that no fuse will be armed until it is at least 189 yards from the plane. This is known as the minimum arming distance. And all fuses will be armed by the time they are 243 yards from the plane. This is the maximum arming distance. Once armed, the fuse has a zone of sensitivity, shaped like this, and extending all the way around it. Any large object passing within this zone of sensitivity will cause the fuse to function. Moreover, the greatest concentration of fragments from the burst will follow roughly the same path as the zone of sensitivity of the fuse. In use against planes, then, the VT fuse has the effect of increasing the size of the target. It will burst anywhere within a radius of 50 to 70 feet of a plane, well within the effective bursting radius of the rocket. In all cases of air-to-air use, the minimum range at which these rockets should be fired will vary according to the speed of the plane and the angle of approach. Since the fuse must have 1 second to arm, allowance must be made for the speed of the target. For a plane approaching head-on, the rocket must be fired earlier than for a plane moving at right angles, or a plane moving away. If the rocket should miss the target so far that the fuse fails to function, there is a self-destruction element which will cause a burst in 6 to 12 seconds after firing, reducing the danger when used over friendly territory. If the rocket should land and become a dud, it should not be disturbed. The VT rocket fuse may also be used effectively against ground targets, but there are certain considerations to bear in mind. A low angle of approach will result in excessive range dispersion. Terrain irregularities such as streams, cliffs, or trees will act as a barrier and cause the fuse to function, which may be desirable if there is a target at the barrier. A steep angle of approach will eliminate range dispersion and at the same time will eliminate barrier functions. In all cases, the fuse will require 1 second in which to arm. This VT fuse for rockets is known as the T5. The nose, switch, and booster housing come packed together in a moisture-proof can, which should not be opened until the fuse is needed. But the fuse as issued is not complete. The parts must be disassembled and a battery added. The nose is sealed and needs no adjustment. The cardboard spacer may be discarded. The switch contains an electric detonator and a powder train interrupter and has a pellet of tetrol in the bottom. The housing contains a booster charge of tetrol in its base. For operation, the T5 fuse depends on a battery. Batteries are packed separately in fiber containers. These containers should never be opened until the batteries are about to be used. These fuses should be handled with the same care as any other fuse. However, if they have been dropped or otherwise mishandled, the components can be tested and the defective parts discarded. In any case, batteries older than 6 months should be tested before using. Full instructions for testing come with the test set. Now the fuse is ready to be assembled. The switch is placed on a clean, smooth surface and the battery plugged into it. Then the nose is plugged into the battery. The parts are marked so they may be aligned properly. Everything fits into the booster housing, which is screwed onto the nose. Now, with the battery added, the fuse is ready for the rocket. This fuse will fit any 4.5-inch fin-stabilized aircraft rocket, and it should fit tightly. To make sure of this, a wrench is supplied with each box of fuses. After the fuse is firmly seated, the set screw should be tightened. The assembly is now moisture-proof and as rugged as any other point-detonating fuse. Excessive rough handling will not decrease the safety of the fuse, but it may increase malfunctions. Next come the fins. To check them, the fin retainer must be removed. For proper functioning of the fuse, it is important that the fins remain firmly in open position during flight. But in testing, they should not fall completely open of their own weight. If they are loose, vibration might cause the fuse to function as soon as it is armed and before it reaches the target. A fin notching tool may be used to tighten loose fins. The fin should then be opened to remove any excess metal. Rockets with VT fuses are loaded the same as rockets with any other fuses. All connections, of course, should be tight. And these rockets are fired the same, with one exception. There must be at least 1/10 of a second interval between rockets. This interval will prevent an early burst from serving as a target and causing another rocket to burst. However, an early burst can occur only after the rocket has traveled its minimum arming distance. That covers the VT fuse as used in rockets fired from planes. Now we'll consider the VT fuse for bombs. There are two main types, the ring type, such as the T-90, and the bar type, such as the T-51. Each type has several variations. VT fuses have been designed for all general-purpose fragmentation and chemical bombs weighing 100 pounds or more and normally using the AN M103 fuse. Both the ring type and the bar type operate the same. They do not have batteries. Both are armed by a vane which turns in the airstream. Their chief difference lies in their zones of sensitivity. The ring-type fuse has a zone of sensitivity shaped much like this. The zone extends all the way around the fuse. The height of burst depends on the angle of approach. The bar-type fuse has a zone of sensitivity extending out in front. For high-altitude bombing, where the bomb will approach the target from near the vertical, the bar-type fuse will give a higher burst and a more uniform height of burst. All VT bomb fuses come in hermetically sealed containers packed in boxes. They should never be unpacked until it's time to use them, and unused fuses should always be sealed up again. In humid climates particularly, no fuse should be left out of its container more than 48 hours. In handling, great care must be taken to protect the vane. If it is bent or broken, the fuse will not perform properly and should not be used. Fuses may be installed either with the bombs in the plane or before the bombs are loaded. Before a fuse is installed, it should be carefully inspected. Then, the nose plug is removed from the bomb. The safety pin is removed from the tail of the fuse. The lock washer, which comes on each fuse, must be used to ensure a tight fit. A fuse wrench, which comes with each box of fuses, should be used to make doubly sure the fuse is tight. The bar-type fuse is installed in exactly the same way, but be careful of those bars. They are easily broken and must never be used to tighten the fuse. Use the wrench. With the nose fuse in place, one of the M100 series of tail fuses is installed. This is to assure a burst in case the bomb strikes the ground before the VT fuse has functioned. If both the nose and tail fuse fail, the dud should not be disturbed for at least 60 minutes. Then the fins are checked. They must be securely fastened. Loose fins can set up a vibration, which may cause the fuse to function as soon as it is armed. Watch these bombs. The last two have loose fins, which will cause them to function before they reach the target. One early, two earlies. That's why it's so important to make sure the fins are tight. The final step in preparing the fuse is attaching the arming wire. It is attached first to the tail fuse, and a safety clip is applied. Then the wire is attached to the VT fuse in the nose. When the seal is removed, the wire is threaded through the hole in the vane locking pin. The cotter pin is withdrawn, and the force of the spring holds the wire in place. No safety clip is needed. When the bomb is dropped, the wire is withdrawn. The vane locking pin is forced out by its spring, and the vane is free to rotate in the airstream. After the bomb shackle is attached, the bomb is ready for action. No matter where the bombs are fused, the same precautions apply. The fuse must always be screwed in tightly. The fins must always be tightened. But the VT fuse has several important safety features. Dropping the bomb while loading will not cause the fuse to function, although it will probably ruin it. Nor will the VT fuse function if a plane should crack up while taking off or returning with a load of bombs. These fuses can be armed only by the vane rotating rapidly in the airstream. When a bomb is released, the rotation of the vane through a gear reduction train moves an out-of-line element into place and closes a switch. This takes approximately 2,000, 2,600, or 3,600 feet along the trajectory, depending on the type of fuse. This distance is known as the safe air travel. But all fuses of a given type will not arm in exactly the same distance. The minimum distance at which a fuse will arm is known as the minimum safe air travel. The distance beyond which no fuse will remain unarmed is known as the maximum safe air travel. The area between is the region of arming. The distance a bomb will drop vertically during its minimum safe air travel is known as the safe vertical drop. It depends, of course, on the size of the bomb and the speed of the plane. The distance a bomb will drop during its maximum safe air travel is known as the minimum release altitude. That is, bombs should not be released from a lesser altitude, because some of them might strike the ground before their fuses are armed, which of course would result in duds. This is what happens in practice. A train of bombs is released. The vanes start turning in the airstream. The bombs approach the region of arming where the fuses are armed. As they fall farther, they approach the target. They burst above it and scatter fragments over the entire area. But there is one important thing to remember about train drops. Since armed VT fuses are sensitive to their surroundings, there must be sufficient intervalometer spacing between bombs, or the detonation of one bomb might set off other bombs in the train. With 100 and 260-pound bombs, the interval should be at least 1/6 of a second. At 200 miles per hour, this is about 50 feet. With 500-pound bombs, the interval should be at least 1/3 of a second. At 200 miles per hour, this is about 100 feet. In formation bombing in depth, the VT fuse introduces another complication. A plane flying at an altitude below the safe vertical drop of the planes above might act as a target and cause the armed VT fuse to function. To prevent such an occurrence, a device known as the T2E1 arming delay has been developed. One T2 is included with each VT bomb fuse. This T2 will add from 700 to 20,000 feet to the safe air travel of a VT fuse. Here's how it works on a ring-type fuse. The arming wire is passed through the T2 before it is threaded through the vane locking pin. Then the T2 is hooked onto the ring of the fuse, and the locking arm is fastened by closing the bar. By depressing the stud, the dial can be set to any desired amount of safe air travel. Next, the cotter pin is removed from the vane locking pin. Now, when the bomb is dropped and the arming wire is withdrawn, the T2 holds in the locking pin and prevents the vane on the fuse from turning. As the vane on the T2 rotates, it operates the gear reduction train and turns the dial. When the desired distance has been traveled, the T2 flies off and releases the vane locking pin. The vane on the fuse starts turning, and the fuse will arm in its normal distance from this point. This same T2 is used on bar-type fuses. It fits onto a strap bracket and holds in place a vane locking arm, which prevents the vane from turning. When the T2 drops off, the locking arm follows it, and the vane is free to arm the fuse. With the T2 attached to VT fuses, the region of arming may be extended any desired distance up to 20,000 feet, and formation in depth bombing is just as safe as with any other fuse. The fuses on these bombs, for instance, are set to function as soon as they are armed. The T2 has given them plenty of safe air travel to clear any planes flying below. For the purpose of demonstration, the T2s on these fuses have been set for different arming distances. The VT bomb fuse was designed for use against personnel and light materiel. To be effective, it must have a fair burst height. Ring-type fuses burst at 15 to 45 feet over land. They burst at about twice that height over water. Bar-type fuses burst at 30 to 60 feet over land, and twice that over water. The height of burst will always be determined by the angle at which the bombs approach the target, and the angle will be determined by the speed of the plane and the altitude of release. The VT fuse was not intended to take the place of other fuses, either in bombs or in rockets. It was designed for use primarily against targets which can be damaged by fragmentation. Used with care and imagination, the VT fuse not only increases the effectiveness of our attack against the usual targets, but it may very well increase the types of targets which can be attacked.